Commander Jake Morrison gripped the controls of the USS Constellation as his ship limped through the darkness of space. The red warning lights blinked constantly on his console, casting an eerie glow across the damaged bridge. Sparks shot out from broken panels, and the smell of burning circuits filled the air. Jake wiped sweat from his forehead and checked the ship's systems for the 100th time. The Constellation was barely holding together. Its hull showed dozens of scorch marks from enemy weapons, and 3 of its primary engines were completely dead. The secondary systems were running on emergency power, and Jake knew he had maybe 6 hours before everything failed completely. But he also knew that he was the only human ship left. Behind him, floating in the debris field that used to be known as the Proxima Centauri system, were the broken remains of humanity's last fleet. Dozens of ships that had been humanity's hope for survival now drifted as silent monuments to their failure. The Battle of Proxima Centauri was over, and humanity had lost everything. Jake stared at the wreckage through the forward viewport. He could see pieces of the mighty USS Enterprise, the sleek USS Defiant, and so many other ships that had carried the hopes and dreams of billions of people. All of them were gone now, reduced to twisted metal and floating debris. The Zorthian had been too powerful, too advanced, too ruthless. But Jake was still here. The Constellation had survived, though barely, and with it, humanity's last chance. "Sir," called out Dr. Lisa Martinez from her station near the back of the bridge. "I'm picking up some kind of signal. It's not from our fleet, and it's not from the Zorthians either." Jake turned to look at her. Lisa was the ship's chief scientist and one of the smartest people Jake had ever met. She had been working non-stop for the past 18 hours, trying to keep their damaged systems running and analyzing the strange readings they had been getting since the battle ended. "What kind of signal?" Jake asked, his voice hoarse from stress and exhaustion. "It's a communication beacon, sir. I think it's coming from some kind of space station. The signal is repeating on multiple frequencies, and it seems to be welcoming." Jake felt a spark of hope. In all the chaos of the battle and the desperate retreat, they hadn't had time to investigate any potential friendly contacts. But if there was a space station out here, and if it was truly friendly, then maybe there was still a chance. "Can you clean up the signal? I need to know who we're dealing with." Lisa worked quickly at her console, filtering out the static and interference that filled their communication systems. After a few minutes, a voice came through the speakers. Speaking in Standard Galactic, the common language used by most spacefaring civilizations. "This is Kepler's rest station, calling all ships. This is a neutral trading post and diplomatic facility. All vessels are welcome to dock and receive assistance. Repeat, this is Kepler's rest station." Jake exchanged glances with Lisa. A neutral trading station could be exactly what they needed. These places were supposed to be safe zones where ships from different factions could meet without fear of attack. If they could reach Kepler's rest, they might be able to get help, repairs, maybe even allies. "Lisa, can we make it to this station?" She checked her instruments carefully. "It's about 2 light hours away, sir. At our current speed and power levels, we should be able to reach it, but it will be close. Do it. Set course for Kepler's rest." As Lisa worked on the navigation system, Jake made his way to the communication station. He needed to respond to the station's hail, but he also needed to be very careful about what information he shared. He didn't know who might be listening, and he certainly didn't want the Zorthians to learn about any potential allies humanity might have found. "This is Commander Jake Morrison of the USS Constellation," he said into the microphone. "We are responding to your signal. We are in need of assistance and would like to dock at your facility." There was a pause before the response came. "Commander Morrison, this is Station Master Krell Varnock. Welcome to Kepler's rest. We show your ship is heavily damaged. What is your situation?" Jake took a deep breath. This was the moment that would determine everything. How he answered this question would shape how these aliens viewed humanity. and whether they would be willing to help. "We are survivors, Station Master. Our fleet was destroyed in battle with the Zorathian forces. The Constellation is the only human ship to escape." Another pause, longer this time. When Varnak spoke again, his voice was different, more serious. "Commander, please stand by. I need to consult with our diplomatic team." Jake nodded, even though the station master couldn't see him. He understood. News like this would require careful consideration. If there were other ships at the station, other species, they would all want to know what this meant for their own safety. Lisa came over to stand beside him. "What did you tell them?" "Everything they need to know to understand the situation. Now we wait and see how they respond." For the next 30 minutes, the Constellation continued on its slow course toward Kepler's Rest while the station's crew discussed what to do about this unexpected arrival. Jake used the time to check on his crew and assess their condition. The ship's company of 200 had been reduced to 43 survivors. The rest had died in the battle or from injuries sustained during the fighting. Those who remained were exhausted, wounded, and traumatized by what they had witnessed, but they were still alive, and they still had a job to do. Chief Engineer Mike Thompson reported from engineering that the ship's power systems were stable for now, but they were running dangerously low on fuel and spare parts. Medical Officer Dr. Sarah Williams confirmed that the wounded were stable, though they needed proper medical facilities to recover fully. Jake made notes of everything, knowing that he would need this information when negotiating with the station's authorities. He also knew that his crew was watching him, looking to him for leadership and hope in their darkest hour. Finally, the communication channel opened again. "Commander Morrison, this is Station Master Varnak. We have reviewed your situation and have decided to grant you permission to dock. We will provide emergency assistance to your crew and your ship. However, I must inform you that we have representatives from multiple species aboard our station, and your arrival has raised many questions." "I understand, Station Master. We are grateful for your assistance and willing to answer any questions you may have." "Very well. We will guide you to Docking Bay 7. Please maintain your current course and speed. We will send a medical team to meet you upon your arrival." As the station's guidance system took control of their approach, Jake felt the first real sense of relief he had experienced since the battle ended. They were going to make it. They were going to survive. But even as he felt grateful for their rescue, Jake knew that their real work was just beginning. The Zorathians were still out there, and they would not stop until they had eliminated every human they could find. If humanity was to have any future, Jake and his small crew would have to convince these aliens to stand with them against the greatest threat the galaxy had ever known. The Constellation moved slowly toward the massive space station, its hull scarred but intact, carrying the last hope of the human race. Whatever happened next, Jake knew that everything would change when they docked at Kepler's Rest. Station Master Krell Varnak stood in the observation lounge, watching the damaged human ship approach through the reinforced transperisteel viewport. The USS Constellation looked like it had been through hell and back, with scorch marks covering its hull and parts of its outer shell visibly missing. 3 of its primary engines were dark, and the ship was moving at barely half its normal speed. Krell was a seasoned diplomat who had served on Kepler's Rest for over 20 years. In that time, he had dealt with dozens of different species, each with their own customs, languages, and ways of thinking. But humans were something new to him. He had heard stories about them, mostly from traders who claimed they were fierce fighters and clever engineers, but he had never encountered one personally. "The ship is requesting permission to dock," reported his assistant, a young Draconian named Zara, who had been monitoring the communications channel. "They're transmitting their identification codes now." Krell nodded thoughtfully. "Put me through to the council chamber. I want all department heads to assemble immediately. This situation requires our full attention." Within minutes, Representatives from every species currently aboard the station were gathering in the main conference room. Kepler's Rest was truly a crossroads of the galaxy, hosting diplomats, traders, and travelers from across known space. Today's meeting would include the insectoid Kethmori, represented by their ambassador Shiltak, the crystalline Centauri, speaking through their spokesperson Chantara, the gas-form Zephyrians, communicating through their translator unit, and several others. Dr. Lisa Chen, the station's chief xenobiologist, was already present when the others arrived. She had been studying the human transmissions with intense fascination. "Station Master," she began, as soon as everyone was seated, "I've been analyzing the biological data from their ship. Humans are carbon-based life forms, similar to many species we've encountered, but there are some interesting differences in their neural structure." "What kind of differences?" asked Shiltak, his multiple eyes focusing on the screen displaying human anatomical diagrams. "Their brains show unusual activity in areas associated with creativity and adaptability. Their problem-solving methods appear to be quite different from most species we know. Instead of following established protocols, they seem to improvise solutions based on their circumstances." Chantara's crystalline form shimmered as she processed this information. "You're suggesting they might be unpredictable?" "Possibly," Lisa replied. "But unpredictability can be an advantage in certain situations. It makes them harder to anticipate." Captain Thak Morvan, the Klingon-descended warrior, who served as the station's security chief, leaned forward aggressively. "If they were in battle with the Zorathians, why should we trust them? Maybe they're spies or saboteurs." "Because Krell said calmly, they're desperate. No spy would broadcast their defeat so openly. No saboteur would arrive in a ship that's barely functional. They're survivors, not infiltrators." The discussion continued for another hour, with various representatives expressing concerns and asking questions. The Zephyrians worried about potential contamination from human technology. The Kethmori were curious about human social structures. The Centauri wanted to know about human artistic achievements. Finally, Krell made his decision. "We will allow them to dock and provide basic assistance, but we will maintain security protocols until we learn more about their true intentions." As the meeting broke up, Lisa approached Krell. "Station Master, I'd like to be part of the welcoming committee. This is a unique opportunity to study an entirely new species." Krell considered this request. Lisa was one of the station's most respected scientists, and her expertise in xenobiology made her an ideal choice for first contact situations. "Approved. But remember, Dr. Chen, you're there to observe and learn, not to interfere." 2 hours later, the constellation finally entered Kepler's Rest, docking Bay 7. The massive chamber was designed to accommodate ships of all sizes and configurations. But even so, the human vessel looked oddly fragile compared to the sleek alien craft that usually visited the station. Emergency. Crews were already in position, ready to assist with repairs and medical care. Dr. Sarah Williams led a team of medical personnel, while engineering specialists prepared to help with the ship's damaged systems. Jake Morrison was the first human to emerge from the constellation's airlock. He was tall and lean, with dark hair and tired eyes that had seen too much in too short a time. His uniform was wrinkled and stained, but he carried himself with the bearing of someone accustomed to command. Krell stepped forward to greet him, flanked by Lisa and 2 security officers. "Welcome to Kepler's Rest, Commander Morrison. I am Station Master Krell Varnat. On behalf of all our residents, I extend our sympathies for your loss." Jake nodded gratefully. "Thank you, Station Master. Your assistance means more than you know." Lisa studied the human commander with scientific curiosity. His facial expressions were subtle but expressive, quite different from the more rigid features of many alien species. She noticed how his eyes moved constantly, taking in details of his surroundings, while maintaining polite conversation. "Commander, if you would accompany us to the medical facilities," Dr. Williams said gently. "Your crew needs immediate attention." Jake looked back at his ship, where his remaining crew members were beginning to emerge. 43 people who had survived the impossible, but who were all showing signs of trauma and exhaustion. "They come first," he said firmly. "I'll be along shortly." Lisa found this protective attitude fascinating. Many species would have prioritized their own comfort, but this human put his people before himself. It was a trait worth noting. As the medical teams began treating the human survivors, Lisa approached Jake again. "Commander, I'm Dr. Lisa Chen, the station's xenobiologist. I'd like to ask you some questions about your species, if you don't mind." Jake looked at her with interest. "You're a scientist?" "Yes. I study different life forms and their characteristics. Your species is completely new to our records. Then you don't know much about humans yet." "Not enough, but I'm eager to learn." Jake considered this. These aliens had helped them without asking for anything in return. Maybe sharing some information wouldn't hurt, and it might help build trust. "What would you like to know?" Lisa pulled out a small recording device. "Everything, if possible. But let's start with something simple. What makes humans different from other species?" Jake thought for a moment. "We adapt. We don't just follow rules or stick to traditions. When things change, we change with them. It's helped us survive on Earth for thousands of years." "Fascinating. And your approach to problem solving?" "We try different things. If one way doesn't work, we try another. We're not always right the first time, but we keep trying until we find something that works." This was exactly what Lisa had observed in the data. Humans seem to thrive on experimentation and innovation, qualities that could be extremely valuable in the right circumstances. Meanwhile, Krell was receiving reports from various departments. The engineering teams had completed a preliminary assessment of the constellation's damage. The medical staff had treated the human survivors and found them to be in surprisingly good health, considering their ordeal. Security had monitored all communications and found no evidence of deception or hidden agendas. But the most interesting report came from the communications center. The human ship had been broadcasting distress signals across multiple frequencies, and at least 3 other stations had received their transmissions. If the Zorathians were monitoring these channels, they would soon know that human survivors had been found. Krell called a second emergency meeting. This time, the atmosphere was more tense. The possibility that their location might be compromised added a new urgency to their situation. "We need to decide what to do about these humans," Captain Morvan said bluntly. "If the Zorathians come looking for them, we could all be in danger. But if we turn them away," Lisa argued, "we're no better than the Zorathians themselves. These people have lost everything. They're refugees, not threats." Shiltak's compound eyes reflected the room's lighting as he considered the situation. "Perhaps there is another way. If these humans are as adaptable as Dr. Chen suggests, maybe they could be useful allies against the Zorathian threat." This idea gave everyone pause. None of them had considered that the humans might represent an opportunity rather than just a problem. Jake, overhearing this discussion through the partially open conference room door, realized that his next words might determine not just humanity's fate, but the fate of every species represented in that room. The weight of responsibility settled heavily on his shoulders as he prepared to tell them the truth about what had really happened at Proxima Centauri. Jake Morrison stood outside the conference room door, listening to the alien voices discussing his people's fate. The weight of responsibility pressed down on him like a physical force. These beings had saved his crew, but now they were debating whether to help humanity or cast them out. He knew he had to act quickly. Taking a deep breath, Jake pushed open the door and stepped into the room. All conversation stopped as every alien turned to look at him. Their faces showed surprise, curiosity, and in some cases, concern. "Excuse me," Jake said calmly. I couldn't help but overhear your discussion. I think there's something important you need to know. Station Master Krell Varnak recovered first from the surprise. Commander Morrison, please, have a seat. We were just discussing your situation. Jake shook his head. No, I think it's time I told you the whole truth. Not just about our defeat, but about what the Zorathians really are and what they want. The room fell completely silent. Even the breathing systems of the gas forms of Phorians seemed to pause. 2 weeks ago, Jake began, his voice steady despite the memories that threatened to overwhelm him. Humanity sent our entire fleet to stop the Zorathian advance at Proxima Centauri. We had over 300 ships, the best fighters and weapons our species could produce. We thought we were ready. He paused, remembering the faces of the commanders who had stood beside him in the final briefing. Good people who had believed they could save their worlds, but we weren't ready. The Zorathians weren't just another enemy fleet. They were something different entirely. Their ships were faster, their weapons more powerful, their tactics more advanced than anything we had ever encountered. Within hours, our formation was broken. Within a day, most of our ships were destroyed. Lisa Chen leaned forward, her scientific curiosity overcoming her shock. How did you survive? What made your ship different? Jake looked at her gratefully. At least someone wanted to understand rather than fear. Luck, mostly, and timing. The constellation was on the edge of the formation when the main attack came. We took damage, but we weren't in the center of the destruction. When it became clear that we couldn't win, I ordered a retreat. Most of the other ships tried to fight to the end. And the Zorathians, Captain Morvan asked. What are they really? Like Jake's expression darkened. They're not just conquerors. They're harvesters. They don't just want to control territory or resources. They want to collect everything. Every species they defeat, they study. They take their technology, their biology, their knowledge, and they use it to make themselves stronger. Shiltak S. Multiple eyes widened. You mean they absorb other species? Not absorb, they collect. Like someone gathering samples. They destroyed entire worlds just to learn how those species had adapted to their environments. They killed billions of people just to add to their database. The room erupted in shocked whispers. The implications were staggering. If what Jake said was true, then every species in the galaxy was in danger. How do you know this? Gemtara asked, her crystalline form pulsing with concern. Because we captured one of their ships. Just for a few minutes, but long enough to access their records. They had files on hundreds of species, detailed analysis of their strengths and weaknesses. Humans were just the latest addition to their collection. Lisa felt a chill run down her spine. And now, they know about us. Jake nodded grimly. They know there are human survivors. They'll be looking for us, and when they find us, they'll learn that we found help here. This station, all of you, you'll become targets too. The silence that followed was heavy with understanding. Jake watched, as the alien representatives exchanged glances, each realizing that their comfortable neutrality had just been shattered. But why? Captain Morvan demanded. Why go to so much trouble to collect information on other species? Evolution, Jake said simply. The Zorathians believe that the strongest species deserve to survive, and that means becoming stronger than everyone else. They don't just want to rule the galaxy. They want to perfect themselves by taking the best parts of every species they encounter. Krell Varnak stood up and began pacing. This changes everything. If the Zorathians are truly as dangerous as you describe, then hiding is not an option. They will find us eventually. Then what do we do? Asked one of the other representatives. Jake looked around the room, meeting each alien's gaze in turn. We fight. Together. Humans may have been defeated, but we're not finished, and we're not alone anymore. Lisa felt excitement building in her chest. You're talking about forming an alliance? I'm talking about survival. The Zorathians are coming. whether we're ready or not. When they arrive, they won't care about treaties or neutral zones. They'll see every species here as either useful to collect or obstacles to remove. Captain Morven slammed his fist on the table. I won't have my people become victims of some cosmic collector's hobby. Calm yourself, Captain, Krell said quietly. The commander is right. We need to consider our options carefully. What options? Morven shot back. Hide and hope they don't find us. Or stand and fight like warriors. Jake stood up straighter. Actually, there might be a third option. Humans have something the Zorethians don't expect. We're unpredictable. We change our tactics in the middle of battle. We use creativity instead of just following established protocols. Lisa nodded enthusiastically. That's what I noticed in your ship's data. Your neural patterns show unusual activity in areas associated with creative problem solving. Exactly. The Zorethians analyze their enemies, learn their patterns, and then exploit their weaknesses. But they can't predict what humans will do, because we don't always do what makes logical sense. Sometimes we do crazy things that work simply because our enemies never expected them. Shiltak's head moved in what humans might recognize as a nod. You're suggesting that unpredictability could be a weapon. It already has been. That's how I survived the battle. I did something the Zorethian commander didn't expect, and it gave us just enough time to escape. The room buzzed with excited conversation as the alien representatives began to see possibilities where before they had seen only problems. If humans truly were as unpredictable as Jake claimed, they might represent a valuable asset in any future conflict. But we're just one ship, Jake reminded them. 43 people against an entire invasion fleet. Perhaps, Krell said thoughtfully, but you're 43 people who have already survived what should have been impossible odds. That alone makes you worth protecting. Lisa leaned forward, eagerly. Commander, would you be willing to demonstrate some of these human capabilities? I think our military advisors would be very interested to see how your species approaches tactical problems. Jake smiled for the first time since arriving at the station. It was small, but genuine. I think we can arrange that. But first, I need to check on my crew and make sure the constellation won't fall apart while we're talking. As the meeting began to break up, Jake realized that for the first time since the battle, he felt something other than despair. These aliens weren't just helping them survive. They were starting to see humans as potential allies. It was a small hope, but in the darkness that had surrounded him since Proxima Centauri, even a small hope was enough to keep going. The real work was just beginning. Jake Morrison walked through the corridors of Kepler's rest station, feeling the weight of his mission more strongly than ever. The meeting with the alien representatives had gone better than he expected, but now came the hard part, proving that humanity was worth their trust and cooperation. He knew that actions spoke louder than words, especially in a galaxy full of species who judged others by their strength and ingenuity. The station's architecture fascinated him as he moved through its halls. It was a patchwork of designs from different species, each section reflecting the needs and preferences of its builders. Some areas had smooth curved walls that shimmered faintly, while others were made of rough-hewn metal or crystalline structures. Despite the differences, everything worked together seamlessly, creating a space where dozens of species could coexist peacefully. As Jake approached the training area where the demonstration would take place, he saw Dr. Lisa Chen waiting for him outside. She looked up as he approached, her eyes bright with curiosity. "Commander Morrison," she said warmly, "I'm glad you're here. Everyone is inside already. They've been eager to see what you have planned." Jake nodded. "Thanks, Doctor. I just hope this works. A lot depends on it." Lisa smiled reassuringly. "You've already impressed them by surviving against impossible odds. Now you just need to show them why humans are unique." Inside the training area, representatives from nearly every species aboard the station had gathered. Captain Morven stood near the front, arms crossed, and expression unreadable. Beside him, Shiltak's multiple eyes scanned the room, while Gemtara's crystalline form glowed softly with anticipation. Even the Zephyrians had sent a representative, hovering silently in their containment unit. Krell Varnik greeted Jake as he entered. "Commander, we're ready when you are. What exactly will you be demonstrating?" Jake gestured to the central platform, which was surrounded by holographic screens. "We're going to simulate a tactical scenario. Your military advisors can create any situation they want, enemy ships, terrain, obstacles, and my crew and I will respond." Captain Morvan raised an eyebrow. "Any situation. Anything you think will test us," Jake replied confidently. "Humans adapt quickly. That's what makes us dangerous." The Klingon-descended warrior grunted approvingly. "Very well. Let's begin." The simulation began moments later. The holographic screens lit up, showing a fleet of alien ships surrounding the constellation. Their weapons glowed ominously, and their movements suggested careful coordination. It was a standard ambush setup, one designed to overwhelm an enemy before they could react. Jake turned to his small team of human officers, including Chief Engineer Mike Thompson and Communications Officer Sarah Williams. Together, they studied the display, analyzing the enemy positions and calculating possible responses. "What do you see?" Jake asked quietly. Mike pointed to the screen. "Their formation is tight. If we hit one ship, it might cause a chain reaction among the others." Sarah nodded. "But if we try to fire directly, they'll block us before we get close enough." Jake smiled slightly. "Exactly. So let's not play by their rules." He stepped forward and addressed the assembled aliens. "Watch carefully. This is how humans fight." The simulation sprang to life again, and the human team went into action. Instead of charging straight at the enemy fleet, Jake ordered a series of erratic maneuvers that left the simulated opponents confused. The constellation zigzagged unpredictably, using its damaged engines to create bursts of speed, followed by sudden stops. Each movement seemed chaotic, but Jake knew precisely what he was doing. At the same time, Sarah manipulated the communications systems, sending false signals to the enemy ships. Her transmissions mimicked commands from their own commanders, causing some of the ships to break formation and turn on each other. Meanwhile, Mike used the ship's remaining power reserves to overload certain systems temporarily, creating brief bursts of energy that disrupted the enemy's sensors. The aliens watched in stunned silence as the human tactics unfolded. Where most species would have relied on brute force or rigid strategies, the humans danced around the battlefield like ghosts, striking only when opportunities presented themselves. Finally, Jake executed the final phase of the plan. Using the last of the ship's power, he directed a concentrated blast at one key enemy vessel. As predicted, the explosion caused a chain reaction, destroying several nearby ships and scattering the rest. When the simulation ended, the room was completely silent. Then, slowly, murmurs of disbelief and admiration began to spread. "That was incredible," Lisa whispered, barely able to contain her excitement. They didn't follow any traditional combat patterns. Everything they did was unexpected. Captain Morvan stepped forward, his expression thoughtful. "Your tactics are risky. One mistake could have destroyed your ship." "But it didn't," Jake replied. "And that's the point. Humans don't always win because we're stronger or smarter. We win because we refuse to give up, even when the odds are against us." Shiltak's antennae twitched as he processed what he had seen. "Your unpredictability makes you difficult to counter. But can you maintain such tactics in larger-scale battles?" Jake hesitated before answering. "That's why we need allies. Alone, we're vulnerable, but together with all of you, we might stand a chance." Gemtara's crystalline form pulsed brightly. "You're suggesting that our combined forces could complement your adaptability?" "Yes," Jake said firmly. Each of your species has strengths that humans lack. The Kethmori's precision, the Centauri's resilience, the Zephyrian's ability to manipulate energy fields, all of these could work alongside human creativity to create something greater than any of us could achieve alone. Krell Varnak nodded slowly, clearly impressed. Commander, you've given us much to consider. If what you say is true, if the Zorathians truly represent a threat to all life in the galaxy, then we may have no choice but to unite against them. But unity requires trust, Captain Morvan added, his voice firm. How can we be sure that humanity won't abandon us when the fighting gets tough? Jake met his gaze without flinching. Because we've already lost everything. There's nowhere else for us to go. If we fail here, humanity is finished. And if we succeed, we'll owe our survival to every species willing to stand with us. The room grew quiet again as the aliens considered his words. For many of them, this was a new concept. The idea of forming alliances across species lines wasn't unheard of, but it was rare. Most civilizations preferred to focus on their own survival, rather than risking themselves for others. Lisa stepped forward, breaking the silence. Station Master, I believe we should call another council meeting. Based on what we've seen today, I think it's time to discuss the possibility of a formal coalition. Krell nodded. Agreed. Commander Morrison, thank you for your demonstration. You've given us hope and, perhaps, a path forward. As the meeting disbanded, Jake felt a flicker of optimism. These aliens weren't just listening to him. They were beginning to understand. Humanity still had a long way to go, but for the first time since the battle at Proxima Centauri, Jake believed that maybe, just maybe, they wouldn't face the Zorathians alone. Outside the training area, Lisa caught up with him. You did well, Commander. They're starting to see humans as allies, not just refugees. Jake smiled faintly. It's a start, but the real challenge will be convincing them to act, not just talk. They will, Lisa said confidently. Once they realize how serious the threat is, they won't have a choice. Jake nodded, knowing she was right. The Zorathians were coming, and when they arrived, everyone would have to decide whose side they were on. For now, though, Jake allowed himself a moment of quiet satisfaction. The seeds of an alliance had been planted, and with luck, they would grow into something strong enough to withstand the storm ahead. The council chamber of Kepler's Rest was filled with tension as representatives from every species aboard the station gathered for what would be the most important meeting in their collective history. Station Master Krell Varnak stood at the head of the long, curved table, his expression serious but calm. The room buzzed with quiet conversations as the aliens exchanged thoughts and concerns about the idea of forming a coalition to face the Zorathian threat. Jake Morrison sat at one end of the table, flanked by Dr. Lisa Chen and Chief Engineer Mike Thompson. Jake's presence alone was a reminder of the stakes. They were here because humanity had already faced the Zorathians and barely survived. He felt the weight of responsibility pressing down on him, knowing that his words and actions would shape whether these diverse species could come together or fall apart before the enemy even arrived. Krell called the meeting to order, his deep voice cutting through the murmurs. We are here to discuss the possibility of forming a coalition to defend against the Zorathian threat. Commander Morrison has provided evidence of their intentions and demonstrated human tactics. Now, it is time for us to decide if we will stand together or face this danger alone. Captain Thok Morvan, the Klingon-descended warrior who led the station's security forces, leaned forward aggressively. Before we commit to anything, I want to know what each of our species would bring to this fight. Humans may be unpredictable, but unpredictability alone won't stop an invasion fleet. Shultak, the insectoid ambassador of the Kethmori, raised one of his segmented limbs. His multiple eyes focused intently on the group. Our species excels at precision engineering and swarm tactics. We can overwhelm enemies with coordinated attacks, but Only if we have clear objectives and reliable allies. Gemtera, the crystalline Centauri spokesperson, chimed in next. Her body shimmered softly as she spoke. The Centauri are resilient. Our energy shields and structural integrity make us difficult to destroy. But we lack speed and adaptability. If the humans' creativity can complement our strength, we might form a formidable combination. Lisa nodded thoughtfully. That's exactly the kind of synergy we're looking for. Each species brings something unique to the table. Together, we could cover each other's weaknesses. The Zephyrian representative floated silently in its containment unit, glowing faintly as it processed the discussion. Finally, it spoke through its translator device. The Zephyrians can manipulate energy fields and disrupt enemy systems. However, we require physical protection during combat. Without shielding, we are vulnerable. Jake listened carefully, taking mental notes of what each species offered. When it seemed like everyone had spoken, he cleared his throat and addressed the group. What you're all describing is exactly why a coalition makes sense. Alone, none of us can match the Zorothians, but together, we might stand a chance. Captain Morven crossed his arms skeptically. It sounds good in theory, but how do we coordinate such a diverse force? Every species fights differently. What happens when one group moves faster than another, or follows different rules of engagement? That's where humans come in, Jake replied confidently. Everyone turned to look at him. Humans don't just follow rules, we adapt. We can act as the glue holding the coalition together. My crew and I can work with your teams to develop strategies that play to everyone's strengths, while covering weaknesses, Lisa added quickly, and I can help facilitate communication between species. Understanding each other's biology, psychology, and culture will be critical to working effectively as a team. Krell tapped his claws lightly on the table, drawing attention back to himself. Commander, your proposal is ambitious, but ambition alone won't win battles. Do you have a plan for how this coalition would operate? Jake nodded. Yes. First, we need a central command structure. Someone needs to lead the coalition, not to dictate orders, but to ensure coordination across all units. Second, we need to combine our technologies. Your ships, weapons, and defenses should be integrated into a unified system. Third, we need training exercises so that every species learns how to fight alongside the others. Gemtara tilted her head curiously. Who would lead this coalition? Jake hesitated before answering. I think Station Master Varnek would be the best choice. You're neutral, respected by all species here, and experienced in diplomacy. Plus, Kepler's Rest could serve as our base of operations. Krell looked surprised, but nodded slowly. If the Council agrees, I am willing to take on this role for now, but leadership must remain flexible, depending on the situation. Lisa raised her hand slightly. There's another factor to consider: morale. Fighting the Zorothians won't just be about technology or tactics, it'll also be about belief. These species need to trust each other enough to risk their lives together. Jake agreed. Exactly. That's why we need to start small. Begin with joint training exercises, share resources, and build relationships. Over time, trust will grow. And when the Zorothians arrive, we'll be ready not just as individuals, but as a united force. Captain Morven still looked unconvinced. Even if we agree to this, how do we prepare in time? The Zorothians could reach us within weeks or days. We use what we have, Jake said firmly. Every ship, every weapon, every piece of technology counts. We modify them, upgrade them, and integrate them into a single fighting force. It won't be perfect, but it doesn't have to be. It just has to work. Mike Thompson spoke up for the first time. Sir, I've been working with the engineering teams aboard the station. If we pool our resources, we could retrofit several ships with hybrid systems, combining human adaptability with alien efficiency. It wouldn't solve everything, but it would give us an edge. Lisa smiled encouragingly. That's the spirit. Innovation and collaboration, that's what will set us apart from the Zorathians. The room fell silent as the representatives considered what they had heard. For many of them, the idea of forming such a coalition was daunting. They were used to operating independently, protecting their own interests without risking themselves for others. But the reality of the Zorathian threat loomed large over all of them. Finally, Shiltak broke the silence. The Kethmori will join this coalition. Our survival depends on it. Gemtara followed suit. So will the Centauri. We cannot face this enemy alone. One by one, the other species voiced their support. Even Captain Morven gave a reluctant nod. If the humans truly believe they can hold us together, then my warriors will fight alongside them. Krell looked around the room, his expression softening slightly. Then it is decided. We will form a coalition to stand against the Zorathians. Let this be the beginning of a new era of cooperation among species. As the meeting adjourned, Jake felt a surge of hope. It wasn't victory yet, but it was progress. The aliens weren't just agreeing to help, they were starting to see themselves as part of something bigger. Humanity had given them a reason to unite, and now it was up to all of them to turn that unity into strength. Later that evening, Lisa joined Jake on one of the station's observation decks. Through the large windows, they could see the stars stretching endlessly into the void. The USS Constellation floated nearby, its damaged hull reflecting the light of a distant sun. You did well today, Lisa said quietly. They needed someone to show them the way forward, and you gave them that. Jake sighed, leaning against the railing. It's not over yet. Convincing them to form the coalition was the easy part. Making it work, ... That's going to be harder. I know, Lisa replied. But you've already proven that humans can inspire others. Keep doing that, and you'll get them through whatever comes next. Jake glanced at her, noticing the admiration in her eyes. For the first time since arriving at Kepler's Rest, he allowed himself to feel a flicker of pride. You know, Doctor, maybe humans aren't so bad at teamwork after all. Lisa chuckled softly. Maybe not. Just don't let it go to your head. As they stood there, watching the vastness of space, both of them knew that the road ahead would be difficult. But for the first time, they didn't feel completely alone. The coalition was fragile, untested, and full of challenges, but it was real. And in the face of the Zorathian threat, that was enough to keep moving forward. Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the USS Constellation, watching as teams of engineers from different species worked together to repair and upgrade the ship. The once battered vessel was slowly being transformed into something new, a hybrid of human ingenuity and alien technology. It was a symbol of the coalition they were building, proof that cooperation could create something stronger than any one species could achieve alone. The repairs had been underway for 3 days now, and progress was steady but slow. Chief Engineer Mike Thompson coordinated with Kethmori technicians, Centauri structural experts, and Zephyrian energy manipulators to retrofit the constellation's systems. Every modification required careful planning and constant communication. As each species brought its own methods and tools to the task, Lisa Chen joined Jake on the bridge, carrying a datapad filled with updates. We're making good progress, she said, glancing at the readouts on the console. But there's still a lot to do before the ship is combat-ready. Jake nodded. I know, but it's not just about fixing the constellation. This whole process is helping us learn how to work together. If we can get this right, we'll be ready for anything. Lisa smiled faintly. You sound optimistic. I didn't think humans were allowed to feel that way after everything you've been through. Jake chuckled softly. Optimism isn't denial, Doctor. It's hope grounded in action, and right now, we're taking action. Across the station, similar efforts were underway. Alien ships, large and small, were being retrofitted with hybrid systems, designed to maximize their strengths while compensating for their weaknesses. Human tactical software was integrated into Centauri defense grids. Kethmori precision weapons were paired with Zephyrian energy disruptors, and Klingon-descended warriors trained alongside human marines to develop combined assault strategies. Captain Thakmorvan oversaw much of this work, his gruff demeanor masking a growing respect for humanity's adaptability. At first skeptical of Jake's leadership, he had come to appreciate the commander's ability to inspire collaboration among such diverse groups. During one training exercise, Morvan even admitted grudgingly that the humans' chaotic tactics might actually give them an edge against the Zorathians. Meanwhile, Station Master Krell Varnak worked tirelessly to coordinate the coalition's efforts. Diplomacy was his specialty, and he used every ounce of his experience to keep tensions low and morale high. Disagreements arose frequently as species clashed over priorities or methods, but Krell always found ways to resolve conflicts quickly and fairly. One day, during a routine meeting in the council chamber, Krell called everyone's attention to a critical issue. "We have received reports from our scouts," he announced. "The Zorathian fleet has begun moving toward this sector. They are still weeks away, but their trajectory suggests they may pass through the Nexus Point, a strategic location near Kepler's Rest." Jake leaned forward, his expression serious. "What makes the Nexus Point so important?" Krell gestured to a holographic map displayed above the table. "It is a natural choke point in space, surrounded by dense asteroid fields and gravitational anomalies. Any ship trying to enter this region must pass through the Nexus Point. If we position our forces there, we can ambush the Zorathians before they reach Kepler's Rest or beyond." Captain Morvan frowned. "An ambush? That's risky. What if they detect us before we're ready?" "That's why we need to prepare carefully," Jake replied. "If we use the terrain to our advantage and strike at the right moment, we can catch them off guard." Shiltak raised one of his segmented limbs. "The Kethmori excel at ambush tactics. We can deploy our drones to scout ahead and provide real-time intelligence." Jemtara added, "The Centauri can reinforce key positions using our shield technology. Combined with human unpredictability, we might hold the line long enough to inflict significant damage." Lisa nodded enthusiastically. "And the Zephyrians can disrupt their communications and targeting systems. Without coordination, the Zorathians will struggle to respond effectively." Krell looked around the room, gauging the reactions of the representatives. "Does everyone agree that the Nexus Point is our best chance to stop them?" After a brief discussion, the council unanimously approved the plan. Preparations began immediately, with every available resource directed toward fortifying the coalition's position at the Nexus Point. Ships were positioned strategically among the asteroids, hidden from view, but ready to strike. Engineers worked around the clock to ensure all systems were functioning perfectly, while pilots practiced complex maneuvers designed to confuse and overwhelm the enemy. As the days passed, tension aboard Kepler's Rest grew palpable. Everyone knew that the coming battle would determine not only their survival, but also the fate of countless other species across the galaxy. For many, fear mingled with determination. They had no choice but to fight and win. On the eve of the deployment, Jake gathered his crew in the Constellation's mess hall. The room was crowded, with humans and aliens alike, sharing food and stories. Despite their differences, laughter and camaraderie filled the air. These bonds, forged in the crucible of shared purpose, gave strength to those who would soon face unimaginable danger. Jake stood up, raising a glass of water to get everyone's attention. "Tomorrow, we take the fight to the Zorathians," he began, his voice steady and clear. "Some of you may wonder why we're doing this. Why risk everything when we've already lost so much?" He paused, letting his words sink in. "We're doing this because giving up isn't an option, because running away won't save us or anyone else, and because deep down, we all know that standing together is the only way to survive." Cheers erupted from the crowd, A mix of human voices and alien sounds blending into a single roar of defiance. Lisa watched from the corner, her heart swelling with pride. These people weren't just survivors, they were fighters. Together, they had become something greater than the sum of their parts. Later that night, Jake walked the corridors of the station alone, thinking about what lay ahead. He knew the odds were still against them. The Zorathians were powerful, relentless, and driven by a singular purpose. But for the first time since the Battle of Proxima Centauri, Jake felt a spark of genuine hope. The coalition wasn't perfect. Its members came from wildly different backgrounds, spoke different languages, and followed different customs. Yet, somehow, they had found common ground. They had learned to trust one another, to rely on each other's strengths, and to embrace their shared humanity, not just as humans, but as sentient beings, united by a desire to protect their future. As Jake stepped onto one of the observation decks, he saw the stars shining brightly outside. Beyond them lay the unknown, the vastness of space, the promise of discovery, and the threat of annihilation. But within the walls of Kepler's Rest, something remarkable had taken root. A fragile alliance, yes, but one built on courage, creativity, and cooperation, for better or worse. The galaxy would soon see what humanity and its newfound allies were truly capable of.